Oh, hi everybody. Welcome to the Friday. It's a beautiful Friday, by the way. If you're here in this area, then we have magnificent weather, but it's finally looks like fall is coming, so then the winter, and it's finally getting cold. Um, so there is no COVID updates. I guess that's good. There is some concern that this new Stratus variant is going to start coming in rate and going up in numbers, but that hasn't been the case. Interestingly, there's been a pretty significant uptick in other respiratory infections, and I would tell you, I've seen a lot of people coming to the office with a variety of different things. But I have not seen a COVID in probably a couple of weeks at this point. So I'm not going to talk about COVID more. I'm not also going to talk about vaccines unless you have specific questions. Um, and you know the drill. So if you have questions, drop them in the box. It will help me quite a bit to strategize the first half an hour. And I didn't actually specifically prepare a wellness talk. What I was going to talk a little bit about is the concept of deprescribing medications. Those of you who've been coming here may have remember me talking a few weeks ago, maybe more like a month ago, about the fact that we have a pretty substantial polypharmacy crisis in the country, to the point where, as of 2025, the medication is now a third leading cause of death. About 250,000 Americans being killed every year by prescription medications. And the strategies for deprescribing do not exist in the standard of care. They're very insufficient. What I mean by that, when patient comes in with particular complaint and they have symptoms, if you don't know how to manage those symptoms without pills, there is nothing else that system usually offers. So the deprescribing really lays way heavier into the integrative domain. We definitely don't have any time to talk about lots of specifics here, but I will mention a couple of strategies. So I will take basically a couple of categories. I will take the sleep category and I will take the acid reflux category. So the acid reflux, there's a medications that are called PPIs, proton pump inhibitors, Nexium, Protonix, omeprazole, etc. Very safe medications if you take them for a few weeks, but if you don't, and if you take them for years, they increase mortality by 30%. So every year, these pills kill about 10 to 15,000 Americans. They exceedingly concerning for two reasons. Number one, the moment you've been on these pills for more than a few weeks, they permanently shift your microbiome to the point where microbiome becomes highly unhealthy and there is no way of coming back from it. So there's no way of fixing this problem. It doesn't exist at the moment. We don't know what happens if somebody has been on acid suppression for a long time and then that person stops the acid suppression and then takes probiotics or something else. We don't know if we can even fix this problem. There is no clear information. What we do know that if you take it for a short period of time, the microbiome seems to bounce back pretty quickly. But for a long intake, it's not really clear. So it's not known whether you can restore the microbiome or not. So the idea that these medications lead to kidney failure, to the dementia, to Alzheimer's, to C. diff colitis, to pneumonia, et cetera, probably most of these things do relate to microbiome ultimately, even though I don't really have a proof of it, but that's the way I perceive the data. So what you can do. So by the way, there's a question about Prevacid. We're not talking about those pills. So Pepcid is fine. Pepcid does not suppress acidity in the same way, and those medications seems to be a lot safer. We are specifically talking about proton pump inhibitors, PPI. So this is the omeprazole, Nexium, Protonix. Protonix also is known as pantoprazole. So all of these medications collectively that are called PPIs. So the taper off is very sophisticated. The withdrawal from these drugs can take up to 6 months. Originally, when I started being very aggressively deprescribing this, I was telling people 2 to 4 weeks. But then in the last year or so, I've seen outliers where the acidity lasts for up to 6 months. And then I did a little bit deeper ChatGPT dive, and that's what been concerned. There's confirmed. There's clearly data saying that it actually more like months, not weeks, that hyperacidity can last. So what can you do? You definitely need to start gradual taper off. Let's say you're taking a high dose of omeprazole, let's say 40 milligrams, and you drop to 20, and then you start adding additional things. So you can add Pepsid. Pepsid is an old class of medications called histamine blockers, so it doesn't block acidity the same way. And you also add several natural products. You add aloe. You can add aloe as a juice if you can stomach that taste. You can add aloe as a capsules. Definitely licorice, what's something we call DGL. So that's big one. And then okra and any other slimy foods. There's lots of different foods and supplements that will produce kind of a slimy looking substances. So those are the ones you want. For example, also very old drugs that are coating the stomachs. There's been in the past, I don't know, we still probably use them. Carafalate is one. So if you can use those, you can also start looking into diet. So in fact, when you talk to gastroenterologists, the first thing they will tell you, if you have acidity, you need to change the diet. You want to cut out spicy food, you want to cut out acidic foods, etc. Generally, when I work with patients, that's already been done, right? Because they're coming in to see me already tried those recommendations. That's why I'm not concentrating conversation heavily on a diet, but rather talking about supplements that can help you to protect the stomach, to coat it, to soothe it. And then you do very slow taper. Usually in the past, I would do 2 weeks of a lower dose, then 2 weeks every other day, and then 2 weeks of the third day. Now I'm doing every 4 weeks. I found that it works a little bit better. So you very gradually wean off. And at the same time, you can rev up the Pepsid. So on an alternative days, you take Pepsid. Once you're off of the PPI, you're on Pepsid and supplements, then you give this 3 months, and then you can start getting off of Pepsid if you want. Pepsid, you don't have to taper. You can just stop it cold turkey because there's a different mechanism of action. So that's PPIs. Now, what to do with the sleep? And I do see Caroline already anticipating what I'm about to say here. So all hypnotics are in the Beers list criteria. So Beers list criteria is the list of geriatric no-no drugs. The reason for that criteria was established many times ago by American Geriatric Society. The person who created it, as you can imagine, name is Dr. Beers. It's a very interesting name to live with, Beer. And so Dr. Beers created this list, and this list is getting updated, I think, every other year now. And the AGS makes it very specific. They will say why the medication is on the list, what is the specific problem with medication, and why it's recommended not to be given. Let me give you a couple examples. So every hypnotics is on the list, including, by the way, Benadryl. So even though Benadryl is not a hypnotic, it's an allergy medication, but everybody knows that it has a pretty strong sedative properties, but it's on the Beers list criteria. Why? Because side effects outweigh any potential risks of side effects outweigh any potential benefit. The same with every single hypnotic. Hypnotics increase mortality, and they increase mortality quite substantially, in some studies up to 50%. So if you're taking a hypnotic of any kind, it doesn't matter which one, even Benadryl, then you're going to have a substantial increase in the risk of dying from the pill alone. So that's why it's not recommended. And because theoretically, we should not be treating insomnia with pills. Insomnia should be treated with cognitive behavioral therapy, with mindfulness. And yes, so there are supplements. So definitely magnesium. Natural Calm is the one I prefer, which is a powder. If you don't know about this one, I'm happy to send somebody a recommendation by email. Just get hold of me. I do like this. This is probably my first line because it's so low cost, very little side effects. The only thing you have to be aware of, if you have a kidney problems, then you have to be careful with the magnesium. But other than that, there's no real contraindications. There are lots of other things. Of course, people try chamomile and they try valerian, and there are all kinds of herbs, magnolia, and they all can be very, very helpful. So definitely worth exploring. However, I wouldn't necessarily say go there first line. again, because I think that there's just too much variability, and you would probably better off be guided for that specifically. Okay. And that's where the cannabis comes in. And the reason for low dose cannabinoids, a couple of milligrams of THC in combination with CBD, CBG, or CBN, that is simply because the efficacy. The efficacy, in my estimates, is somewhere between 70 to 90%. So most people who try it, when they try it right, they will find it successful. They'll find it very beneficial. And it's also going to be the cheapest approach. It's even cheaper than natural calm. Natural calm will cost you $25, $30 a month. If you get a tincture of cannabis, like very concentrated one, it'll cost you $10 a month, because you're going to use a couple of milligrams and it'll last forever. But there are also gummies. Gummies are going to be a little bit pricier. You're looking probably at about $30 a month, give or take. Gummies are more advantageous from perspective of how you sleep. So if you fall asleep without problems, but then you have a hard time staying asleep, the gummies would be the best choice, because you want them to last longer. Drops under the tongue help people to fall asleep, but their effectiveness doesn't last beyond 2-3 hours, maybe up to 4 in some circumstances. So if you waking up at 3 a.m., this approach won't work. You will need to take a gummies. Gummies can last up to 6 or 8 hours. All right, so it's kind of I'm starting with the last question in the chat simply because of the trazodone Klonopin. So Klonopin is completely off, right? Because it's a benzodiazepine, very dangerous drug in that perspective on Beersley's criteria, but not trazodone. Trazodone is a typical antidepressant. If it works for you, it's relatively safe. You can take it long term. Typically, effects on sleep of trazodone do not require to take a very high dose. Most of the time, people can get away with the lower doses that, again, don't have a lot of side effects. Despite that, even the trazodone has some side effects, even though they're not as common. So if you can avoid it, I would avoid it. But the Klonopin for sleep is really not a good drug at all for complex reasons. But in essence, you can put benzodiazepines in the same category as hypnotics, even though they're not exactly the same, but their risks and their benefits are kind of similar. So I'm not going to go and specify this more. Now, what to do if you are on hypnotic and I just told you shouldn't be on it. Well, the taper of hypnotics is even more complicated than taper of PPI. Especially if you're using one of the fast-acting benzodiazepines. So there are some people who have been taking Xanax for sleep for a long time. So Xanax would be the hardest one to get off of because it's so short-acting. There's quite significant dependence to this medication that forms after just a couple of months being on it. So you would probably need to be carefully guided. I cannot give you generic recommendations on deprescribing of hypnotics because it's quite individual and the process really should be guided. But principles the same. You substitute, so you put in maybe the cannabinoids or magnesium, maybe also some herbal supplements, and then you gradually begin to decrease dose of the whatever the medication you're using. And the hardest point is usually at the end, when you're getting ready to go from like the lowest possible dose to nothing. That's when most people start having real problems. So now there are lots of other treatments for chronic insomnia, hypnosis, acupuncture. There's lots of lifestyle interventions. For some people, walk at bedtime or calming the mind down, doing some practices could be quite critical. So there's lots of tools. Of course, we don't have any time to cover even half of them probably. But the point here I'm trying to make is that I'm telling you, and over the course of next months, I'll be covering different deprescribing strategies. We are working with Autonomous Health on creating an automated system to help patients. So you would log into the app, you will put in information that app is asking, and app will guide you how to do it step by step every day. And there's going to be kind of a continuous. So we're still going to start with PPIs because those are the easiest, and then we'll move to hypnotics. Autonomous is not quite ready for general public yet. There's still a lot of kinks and a lot of process to be worked out. And also, it's not necessarily clear that we can legally do this without the engagement of a physicians. So you have to wait for this. My estimate is we're not talking about the actual enrollment of this for about 6 months. But nonetheless, I think once we are doing it, I will definitely walk you through it, and I would invite everybody here to be the kind of early subscribers, if you will. All right, let's do questions. We have about 10 minutes or so. Okay, is high blood pressure a contradiction to giving COVID vaccine? Well, not really, but it does depend on what that high blood pressure is, right? So if your blood pressure is 200, then you shouldn't be getting anything. You should be in the hospital. If your blood pressure is 150, I wouldn't even think twice. It doesn't really matter. You're perfectly fine to go get the shot. So Randall, if you want to be more specific, if you have a more specific range of blood pressure, then I'll probably be able to be a bit more precise. Some questions about taking creatine. Jennifer, I don't know what you mean by that. You want to unmute and ask? Would that be easier? Oops, sorry. Wait, no, I muted you by accident. Click again.
I followed up by in the chat. I just had a premature send. So it says Q's ray creatine below that after marijuana.
I see. Does it degrade in heat? I.e., can you dissolve greedy substance in hot water and then add cooler? I don't know if I understand this. Creatine dissolves pretty well in cold water. So
that hasn't been my experience. It tastes like it's like sand.
Oh yeah, you just drink it. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Oh yeah. I don't think that hot water will. I don't think it'll destroy it. It won't really. It's a very stable molecule, but I don't think it's going to dissolve better. It does improve it in your experience?
That's been in my experience.
Oh, so then use cool hot. You definitely warm up through.
All right.
Well, that's an interesting tip. I did not know that. I just kind of.
There's a lot of crap on the web about creatine because of all the influencers doing it.
So yeah, regarding all that, yeah, it's we live in a times where anybody gets out there with a pretty face and the big muscles and starts sending people all kinds of messaging. I don't know.
Or AI to the equivalent.
Or AI of equivalent. Sometimes they're quite good, but often, I mean, I just can't comment on this. I have to stay true to my own profession and not to get disturbed. Media is, but I will tell you something quite interesting. So I get home yesterday and from the trip to Chicago. So I was giving a talk in Chicago on this topic on deprescribing and just on healthy aging. They asked me, it's a big local community in Barrington, Illinois, and they have a donor who supports their integrative medicine program. So I got to meet with her and give a talk. And anyway, so I get home, and the first thing I walk in, and my younger one is like, "Oh, Dad, look, you're in Washingtonian Top Doctor." And I said, okay, so he made a video. So I kind of recommend if you guys on Instagram or TikTok, go check it out. We're gonna try to model what Andrew Weil does. His daughter, who's obviously not a teenager anymore, and Diana, she's amazing. So she's a healthy chef. So she would ask the Andrew Weil specific questions. So Seva said, "Oh, we got to do this." So we did this yesterday, and in less than a day, it had like 3,000 views. So we're gonna mimic this. It was pretty fun. It's very short video, so we'll do like specific tidbits of information. So,
great.
All right, let's go back to questions. Creatine, we got that done, right? You good with that one? Okay. So Linda, Prevacid is not PPI, Prilizac. Prilizac is wait, Prilizac. I don't know why I'm blanking. Just 1 second, let me Google this, ChatGPT it. Sometimes I have mental blocks like this. Yeah, so Prilizac is a PPI. It's a omeprazole. I don't know why I was blanking. So yeah, that's one of those drugs that you shouldn't be taking, period. That they are because of the so much negative impact on gut microbiome specifically. All right. So we talked about Prevacid. I already said it's not a PPI. We talked about cannabis and supplements for sleep. I answered trazodone and Klonopin. What is the best age for shingles vaccine, and do you need to do any prep to avoid side effects? Great question. So, Carice, it's not really clear. Usually, when people get over 80, we start phasing this vaccine out. There is a specific logic for that. Typically, the worst case scenarios of shingles are somewhere between ages of 60s and late 70s, when immune system is still quite strong. Once you enter 80s, particularly late 80s, and if you never had a shingles in your life, probably I wouldn't recommend the shot. But somewhere, and it's not really clear where would that be. There is no specific recommendation. CDC just says give a shingles shot. I think after 55, if I'm not, or maybe 60. Somebody can Google this if you're interested. Exact answers. The prep is the same. So remember the same prep we do for flu, COVID. It's the same prep. So it's natural dehist and then combination of 3 homeopathics to just decrease side effects. I do advocate for shingles vaccines in specific clinical scenarios. One, if you're truly concerned about neuropathy from shingles, and it's a pretty common scenario. Somewhere about 0.5 to 1% of entire population will experience some neuropathic symptoms, and it's pretty high number if you compare it to side effects of shingles vaccine, which would be 1 in a million or something, serious side effects of it. So from that perspective, you could consider doing it if you're really concerned, or if you already had a history. The third would be if for whatever reason you thinking that your immune system is going to tank. Let me give you a couple examples. You're going to get some treatment that will suppress your immune system. So chemotherapy or radiation for cancer, that'd be a really good example. But definitely I would, before that starts, I'd consider getting the shingles shot. Anything that weakens your system quite substantially, chronic stressors, experiencing some kind of a prolonged traveling. So those are the things that I would probably say may not be a bad idea to get a shingles vaccine. So hopefully that's helpful. Yeah, so Rona, that's exactly right. Beer's list is exactly as you typed. PPI is a proton pump inhibitors. Thanks, Randall, for clarifying. Okay, so great question, Caroline. I see your point about cannabis for sleep. So let me clarify this because it's very important. I have probably talked about cannabis, and by the way, of course, I don't want to plasticize my book, but of course, all of this is in my book. So if you're interested, I'll give you a link in a second to Amazon if you still don't have my book on cannabis, because we have a whole chapter on sleep. So the cannabis for sleep has a very clear J-curve association. What do I mean by that? If you take not enough, it's going to do nothing. So the way you do it, you start with 1 milligram. That's usually my starting dose of THC equivalent. And then you very, very, very slowly titrate up. Most people will fall in the 2.5 to 10 milligram dose that needed to be taken about an hour or 2 hours before bedtime. Problem though, if you keep increasing the dose, I can guarantee you not only you will stop having benefit, you will actually have disturbances of sleep. So you will sleep worse than if you do not take cannabis. And the reason for that is excess THC interferes with sleep pretty substantially. And cannabis has this J-curve distribution in almost every symptom except for pain. But in almost every symptom, nausea is the same example. Things like anti-anxiety. So at the low doses, at the perfect bottom of J-curve, cannabis can be very effective at managing anxiety. But you take a little too much and then you're paranoid. And then you're really anxious. So that theme plays out again and again. So you do have to be very careful. I sometimes used to recommend that if people really want a fast effect, that they will inhale. The problem inhaling any cannabinoids or any cannabis, it's very difficult to control the dose. You're most likely going to overdose. Even if you're trying to regulate it with some special vaporizers, even in those scenarios, unfortunately, the risk of overdose is just too great. That's why I don't recommend this anymore. I recommend that you do edibles or the tinctures and you do precise calculations. So if your gummy says to have 10 milligrams and you want to start with this, it's not terrible. I probably wouldn't start with gummies, but you can. If you have 10 milligrams, I take a quarter. So I'd start with no more than 2.5 milligrams at bedtime and see how that works, and then maybe titrate up as needed. So the great question. Thank you. But yes, do remember that taking too much THC at bedtime will screw up your sleep. It's very important. So recreational use of cannabis does not apply here. It's really important to notice. If you, however, are taking cannabinoids without THC, if you're doing pure CBD, that seems to be pretty safe. And a high dose CBD, some experts, myself not included, but some experts do say that that's the way to go. All right, so I have, let me finish up. So we give Aliza a full half an hour, but meantime, I just want to screen to make sure. How do we search your video? Probably I don't know. I don't remember what I was talking about. I'm assuming it's on my YouTube channel. I'll give you a link to YouTube in the book in a second once I get off of the screen. Linda, there is a protocol on COVID shot on several prior AIMS meetings. And I'm sure that when Janet have a second, she can also post it here. We have a link to that because it comes up a lot. All right. Great. Wonderful to have you, dear Dr. Scharf. So exciting you with us. I know you're going to be talking about something really important, so I'll just shut up, get off the screen, and have you take over.
So I'm going to kind of transition by actually starting with really honoring the content thus far. I think it's so essential. This touched on a lot of different modalities that I really use, and I work very deeply in trauma and the integrative mental health world, a lot with deprescribing, particularly for people with trauma histories who have been on some pretty heavy doses of meds for a long time, including those benzodiazepines. So this, I actually think this conversation is so important and actually kind of sacred. And when we're working with the deprescribing, and sleep is such a huge issue that comes up. One way I think about it, just from the mental health side, we could talk a little bit about spiritual language here too, is to really wrap that person with very deep support, right? Before we want to start taking away something or phasing something out, we want to make sure that they've got the nutrients, right? So we're talking physical nutrients, supplements, emotional nutrients also, to be support systems, social supports, to be able to titrate down and off of some of those medications that folks have become kind of dependent on in some cases. I'm also going to say, just kind of thinking about conceptually COVID, it's interesting kind of thinking about that. I think we're in a real healing phase after the initial COVID crisis, where we're trying to really come back together in community, in better communication, in closer proximity, not just physically, but also trying to re-engage. So I do think about that as part of a healing component also. So just including kind of honoring all that. And I'm going to talk about spirituality in mental health, and the intention. I have some teachings and stuff that I'm going to bring in for you all, but I'm really coming into this with an intention to invite folks to really engage. So whether that's just through thoughtful engagement, really engaging kind of your energetic system, to also invite folks if they have things to ask or share about spiritual practice, terminology. For some folks, this is religious territory. For some folks, it's not. It's just this really big umbrella. So a real invitation to participate And you can have cameras on, cameras off, but I'm very much in relationship and having conversation with you. Okay. So I often start these sessions just making my own background transparent. You all have heard a bio. So I'm a psychotherapist and clinician. I've always really had a very spiritually centered practice, and that's very much what centers me today, ongoing. When I can remember, it centers me. Sometimes I forget and then come back. I would really like to start by inviting you to think about maybe some questions that you have. Okay. And you can write some of those down so that you can come back to them or give yourself a moment to process. So, am I kind of coming into this with any questions? Have I had some questions for a while? You know, kind of what's the meaning of life stuff, or any other curiosity. So I really want to invite that engagement, questioning. So much of spirituality and spiritual process is truly questioning and being in relationship with those questions. It's a deeper way of being in relationship with reality, right? We walk around knowing stuff all the time, like it's really limited and limiting. Okay. And, you know, maybe to kind of think about if there's something you'd really like to maybe come away with today. This would be under the umbrella of kind of goals, intentions. So when you're sort of grounded, perhaps in some questions or intentions, I want to share some teachings. Okay, how can someone relate to serious illness through spirituality? That's really huge. Okay. I'm just going to make sure I'm not missing anything. And if I do, feel free to raise a hand and actually use your voice. I welcome that. Okay. How can you handle stress with the current political situation and shutdown? These are really important questions, right? So they're collective questions. Everybody has their own individual location in them as well. The response to this is going to be different for everybody, but I do want to invite some engagement. Okay, so what I'm going to bring, these are some teachings on non-duality, and that's kind of a universal term on how we might be able to just be present with what's happening and what is, okay, whether it's a chronic illness, political upheaval, from this location of really deep relationship, of being present with what is and what's unfolding, while not excluding something. I think we often can fall into this trap of feeling like we have to choose like this thing or that thing in this split way. And of course, we all know from experience when engaging with reality, we don't get to like select our preferences. We kind of have to deal with all of it. We have to include all of it in some way. Okay, so my hope, I'm bringing hopes and intentions, is to be able to give you, transmit to you some tools for relating in that way. Okay, and then we'll tie it in with an actual meditation. Okay. So I'm going to hold your questions. We can be mindful of them. Perhaps we'll be able to really come back to them specifically. Let's engage it together. Okay. So I'm going to super quick invite folks to come into this in an embodied way. Just, you know, feel your feet on the ground a little bit. Okay, so you might be able to take this in, get comfortable in your chairs or seats. So when we're talking about non-duality, a deep relationship, right? So think about either or versus this. This is non-duality and this is more of the split. Okay, so non-duality, right? The foundation of all relationship, and see that movement that happens. In true non-duality, we understand that a fish never leaves the water. The fish comes to the end of the water. The fish never comes to the end of the water, even if it is an explorer fish, swimming this way and that. It never comes to the end of the ocean because its true nature is to be in the water. The fish and the water are one. As long as we think, here I am whole, and there I'm not, we think there is an end to the ocean of self. But truly, there is no end to the ocean. From the perspective of this passage, God, or reality, you can use whichever word you prefer, is the ocean, and we are the fish. We could also say that being in reality, or the awakened state, is non-dual. To borrow a definition from Wikipedia, non-dualism is the idea that things appear distinct while not being separate. Okay, so appear distinct while not being separate. Reality is so whole. It even contains duality within its singleness, right? So see this? This is a wholeness that includes the duality. You can see both hands, but it's a whole thing. Even though it appears that there is an end to being with God, and that there is a place where God is not, God is one, and we are one with God, we are not and cannot be separate from all that God is. I'm going to pause here. This is big, kind of lofty stuff, and I'll translate that into how that can kind of come up in day to day. If you pay attention to your thoughts that run all day long right across that screen, I think folks notice, especially when we're facing something difficult, that we can often think, if only this were shifted or that were different, then we'd be okay. Okay, as if we get to split things and select things, right? Bottom line reality is that things we don't get to like decipher and siphon out. Now, none of this means we don't work towards change. That's my whole jam. I very much believe in change, and we try to better things. Where we fall into a trap is where we try to work with reality in a way by like fighting with it or pushing up against it, rather than including it and working with it. I think we do this to ourselves also. I think that when we examine ourselves, and anybody ever notice we're so much harder on ourselves than we are on anybody else. So when we look at ourselves, if only, I didn't have this trait, or if only I didn't get pissed off so easily, I'd be a good person. Anybody who's a parent, I think I can speak to that. I notice that we can have a really kind of a harsh lens when it comes to being a parent. This quality or this trait can make me a bad parent. Only I had just this unlimited patience and this serenity, like I saw some TikTok video parent have or whatever, right? We really miss out on a depth when we try to carve away pieces of ourselves like that, instead of really including them. God, let me have this, let me include compassionately with curiosity this piece of myself. It's hard work. It is hard work. It's what healing is. Healing is coming into this kind of this wholeness. I promise I'm almost done with some of this reading part. Let me just transmit some more of this to you. Again, these are words of a teacher of mine, Jason Schulman. This is a profound truth, that we have a great deal of difficulty living fully in our daily lives. The appearances of our lives seem to deny this. Often, God has become something external to us, not something we can fully relate to and completely separate from our human life and our perceptions of the world around us. In ordinary life, what we're most often aware of is how we feel separate or cut off from aspects of our own lives as we are living them. We think that life does things to us, yet life is constantly moving and changing in unpredictable ways. We will die, our loved ones will die, and so on. Okay, so let's just be with that for a moment. Okay, it's a whole deeper thing. It's a whole kind of class actually that's dedicated to mortality. But the idea is to really, instead of thinking that life is just constantly knocking us around, the way I feel into it and actually think about it, we can actually take a seat into the rhythm of life. Life moves us, right? Y'all know that. Oh, it's so interesting. We're talking about aging. We're talking about kind of aging in a healthfully, this geriatric construct. There's such a beautiful spiritual potential actually in that, where we get to think about that reality, right? We move developmentally is all about that, how life moves us. Okay, so if we can like allow ourselves to be carried in a way, like we participate, we're engaged, but allow ourselves to be carried by life a little bit. Okay, I'm loving that there's responsiveness and engagement in the chats too. I want to acknowledge that. Okay. Okay, I want to pause. Are folks kind of following so far? Does anybody have a question? I want to make sure that this actually does feel embodied and not just like esoteric. Okay. Yeah, Carolyn, do you have a question or comment? You're muted. Okay. Carolyn, you're muted. Here, let's see, maybe I can ask you to unmute.
Thank you.
Okay.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
My question is, are you saying that we should not try to compartmentalize something in our daily life, like stress of what I mentioned? For me, it's stressful what's going on around me outside, with the country, etc. So should we try to incorporate that and not try to ignore it?
That is such a great question. And I love that you're just bringing that in this very relatable way. I imagine you're not the only one with that question. So what I would say to that,
thank you.
Compartmentalization, if we think about putting something in a compartment, on a shelf, or in a cubby for a while, that can be a really helpful coping strategy in a moment, right? We can't walk around thinking about everything all the time. Where it becomes problematic is when it starts to go into well, I'm going to put it on a shelf and I'm going to lock the door and kind of throw away a key. That's where what tends to happen, we think about that maybe is more of like repression, when something gets into almost like a denial place. And what we understand kind of psychologically and energetically is to do that on a constant takes a lot of energy. It expends energy. Actually, it can come up in like symptoms sometimes when we're not tending to something. So here's a good way to maybe think about it. When you're noticing that thing that you've compartmentalized like keeps knocking on the door, or it keeps kind of coming up over and over again, it's probably time to relate to it a little bit, right? So maybe and you get to pace this and do this as much as feels okay for you. And there's lots of different tools to do that. But maybe we include a little bit of grief, right? Like I'm sad or I'm angry about what's going on. I'm going to allow myself for a minute or two today in this moment to really feel that. Okay, because that is part of the totality of your experience. It's part of being in relationship with the world, but it is a bit of a dance in a way, right? Because we do have to pace things. When we do healing work, what I always really start with is actually resources. We want to get really grounded in the connections we have, the things that make us feel good, before we're going to tend to some of the pain or rage or darkness, however it's kind of coming up. Okay. So I hope that's helpful and gives some choice points so you could think about how that applies for you. And Jada, you asked a question like, what do I mean by carried? It's the idea, let's use the analogy of water. Instead of just trying to swim on your own and expending all that energy, it's sometimes we really need to allow the water to support us and carry us. Okay. So that's
okay. I'll step with that. Thank
Sure.
you.
Okay. What's that? Was that Jada?
Yes, it's me.
Okay. What can you say it again?
Well, I responded to what you said, and I'm saying that I'll set with that because when you're saying carried, I still don't quite get that concept of how I would allow life to carry me. Is that like releasing and letting go, or?
Yeah, that's a good way. I think people do talk about that in that language. So some people would say something like let go and let God. So it's, I think a very helpful piece of that is to tap into some of the resources and support around you.
Okay.
Okay. And anybody, I'm going to speak really generally, anybody who has a history of needing to do it on their own might have a real just sort of response to that. So to notice that there are supports in place. Yeah, we still gotta, walk and we have to engage, of course. But there are supports in place. And there's a bottom line here is that whether we like it or not, or accept it or don't, life moves us, right? Anybody notice that? Anybody notice, right? What's that phrase?
Yes.
Man plans and God laughs, right? Like,
Right.
I get reminded of that constantly. So, okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Okay, I'm just taking a quick second to kind of think about it. I don't have time to get through everything I'd love to impart and share today, but kind of do our best. I want to make sure I do leave time for that practice to actually drive it all home. Okay. Okay. I'm going to read this other passage, okay? Just hang in there with me. This is really the territory of psychotherapy and how some of this stuff can kind of come up. We expend a great deal of effort trying to protect ourselves in our separateness, treating ourselves as an object, watching out for anything that can hurt us in some way, usually in the form of other human beings, nature, the world itself, even God. So we live our lives, sometimes mistrusting ourselves and our fundamental nature, as well as mistrusting reality as a whole. Okay. At the same time, we've become a society of seekers of God, seekers of wholeness, seekers of happiness, seekers of joy, seekers of pleasure, and are not in relationship to life as it is right now appearing. So this is really bringing in the point that we can either bring our focus and intention to like surveying for danger. And we spend time doing that. And there's something adaptive at times, 100%, right? If there's a car coming to hit us, we want to be aware of that and get out of the way. We can also become really focused. See the narrowness of my hands. We can become really focused just on pleasure seeking and joy, which is wonderful. We want pleasure and joy. And the reality is that we understand more deeply that living life in this wholeness, it includes all of it, right? Mm-hmm. And what's actually kind of beautiful is that some of the polarity of experience, right? Anybody just ever experienced profound, deep loss? And then kind of come out of that. And, you know, I think about death and birth, right? Those are great. And then there's a birth, something new, and just the profound joy of that. I'm thinking of an example of someone I know, a peer of mine who died too young, and the pain her mother experienced, and then this joy of her first grandchild. And it wasn't absent from that pain of loss. Everything was connected. It was the totality of the experience. Okay, and that baby was named after the daughter. Actually, it was really beautiful and moving. Okay, so just thinking about, oh, all of it, right? Maybe in our day-to-day lives, like a takeaway is, okay, am I constricting here, right? Is there something maybe I'm not including? These are all choice points, okay? I'm gonna pause, and I'm gonna read you this meditation. Okay, feel free to follow along. You can listen to it, just kind of take in the wording, but I encourage you to really participate as fully as you can. Okay, so we just begin by sitting quietly, focusing on our breathing, just kind of noticing it. And you say to yourself, so you're noticing breath, you're just present with what is. You say to yourself, there is no life but this one. There are not two lives, one with and without God. This doesn't mean that things will remain the same. My life will continue to change and transform. But right here and now, I'm willing to accept, to be with, to receive my life as it is. There's the line for chronic illness. In this moment, I'm willing to accept, to be with, to receive my life as it is. As you allow yourself to do this, to enter into this moment, this time and place, also let yourself know, even if only a little, that it is by being here that you enter into the place where God helps us change what we need to change and simultaneously be in life as it is. This dance of change and acceptance, which is ongoing, takes place here, now, in the present moment. Okay. Just giving folks a moment to kind of notice what that's like. What's it like to be present in that way, where we're accepting a moment as it is, not excluding desire for change, including that as well. Okay, so inviting folks to come back into the room. We have just a couple of minutes left. If anybody wanted to comment or question, as folks are doing that, I'll mention this really cool thought. I wrote a collection of essays on themes of Jewish holidays and healing, and this is very connected. This theme of change and healing. In Hebrew, it has the same root word for repetition, right? We think of change as something new, but there's something about meeting a moment, meeting a moment deeply, fully, that allows for change. So the acceptance of what is to enable something new in a way. And that's the word for year. So anybody, of course, who's heard of the Jewish holiday of Rosh Hashanah, this is the word Shana. So anybody who's interested, okay. Yes, you can access those essays. I'm gonna put my my website into the chat, okay. On my website, in the About page, there's a drop down for publications. So I have a bunch of essays that you can kind of get just off the website. And there's a book, there's an attachment to Amazon, and it's free on Kindle, and it's like $10 paperback. It's a little thin reader. Okay. Yeah, I've heard of the Institute of Jewish Spirituality. So what I didn't get to say, and I know we're at time, everybody's got their own individual inheritance with spirituality. So I kind of brought my location in it, but normally with a whole other half hour, we'd maybe have a little bit more chance to talk about everybody else's background and what they're kind of bringing in. Okay. So thank you for riding that wave with me today.
Thank you very much.
Okay, noticing these comments.
Thank you.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Okay. Are we at time? I'm happy to take questions or comments, but I want to honor the structure here. I just want to make sure that
I think 1 or 2 questions if people
Okay.
are burning. Absolutely.
Beautiful. Yeah. So I just want to check in if anybody wants to share a comment or an experience or does have a question. That is very welcome. I hope so. Yeah. Is that Carolyn? Go ahead. You're muted again.
So what is your idea about taking action? Like if you feel taking action, I mean physically taking action, or something stressful?
What's that?
That's that's really things that are really stressful. Like for example, I just shared about my stress. My stress in my life is mostly on the outside, not inside.
Mm-hmm.
So for example, being concerned about what's going on, the country, etc.
Yes.
I go to like the No Kings rallies.
Yeah.
And I help register to vote and things like that. That helps. But when you come back and you're with yourself, I just still get really angry and stressed. Mm-hmm. So I'm just trying to incorporate all of that together.
So let's just honor and acknowledge that. I also want to, the website. Okay, I'll put it in again. In terms of taking action, kind of checking in with what is feeling helpful and not. I think people go on journeys with what actions feel helpful. I want to recommend a resource that I think is so wonderful.
Thank you.
It's called Braver Angels. Braver Angels was started by a therapist to really promote dialogue about political upheaval. This was, I know him, Bill Doherty is his name. This has become a really big national movement. I think that there's been incredible healing and both impact and influence. People have been able to make, there's meetings locally, there's all kinds of levels of engagement, there's online lectures, events, but this is a way to be engaged that I know, and there are many, that I think has been very healing for people. So I'm going to recommend that.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'll write it in the chat in case anybody missed it. Okay. Amazing. So anything else?
I'm not picking up what you just wrote in the chat or seeing.
Okay. Oh, I think it's going to a direct message. Let me, okay, let's do it this way. That's what happened. Let's try that. Good. And the website. Okay. Hi. All good?
Yes, that helped.
All right. Excellent. All right. So anything else, or ready to end for today?
If we stay in the moment and don't have our minds go to the future or to the past, I'm trying to get back so you can see me.
Is that Jada?
Yeah.
Talking? Yeah.
So if we can just stay in the moment and be with what is, instead of having our minds go to the future or to the past, then it seems like, well, for myself, I can find peace there.
Yeah. Jada, that's a really beautiful share and such wisdom. And it's a practice, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, thank you. Really, thank you for sharing that. Okay.
I'd like to make a statement. I think that today's days and times, people need to be kinder to each other. You know, there are things you can do every day in life. Just be kinder to people, call people more than text. I send a lot of cards out. If you know anybody who's been affected with the shutdown, send a gift card, food gift card from the store, or call and ask them, is there anything you can do? I've done that. Do you need money? What do you need? Some of this personal stuff needs to happen more in the world today than these group things and text things and social media things. I think that the people need to feel loved. And there's nothing like when you go out to the store and give a smile, hold the door, you see somebody in need right where you walk about every day and say, do you need some help? You know, small things like that, if everybody's doing those things, make a big impact, I think, in the way people see the world and the way people feel the personal touch of the Holy Spirit.
Sheila, that was beautiful. And thank you for sharing that, and makes me think about being a healing presence in the world. I think that was just a really beautiful share, and how you can make a difference in the world, being kind, being in relationship, person to person. Beautiful. And notice how that helps our mental health, right? The giver also. I'm gonna say goodbye to everybody and just kind of finally express my gratitude for being present with me today. And I hope everybody has a beautiful and healing weekend. Okay.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Take care.
Okay, we're gonna stop recording here.